Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology's webinar, An Insider's Look, the Range of Home Modifications and Decision Making. This webinar is provided as part of a grant funded by the Administration for Community Living. We have two excellent presenters who will discuss the range of home modifications to support aging in place and share their firsthand perspective on how design and cost can affect decision-making and consumer choice. We hope this webinar will shed light on these aspects of home modification to support your information and access services and service delivery efforts for older adults in your community. Our first presenter is Denise Levine. She's the Assistant Director at the Idea Center at the State University of New York at Buffalo. A registered architect and certified aging in place specialist, she has more than 20 years of architectural practice experience and is an expert in ADA compliance, home modification, universal design, and accessible design. Katya, or Kat Garel, is the co-founder of Thrive for Life LLC, and she is our second presenter. Thrive for Life LLC is the only residential accessibility consulting firm in Hawaii. She is a proud graduate of the University of Southern California's Chan Division of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy, receiving a Bachelor's of Science in 2001 and Master's in 2002. Kat completed USC's Executive Certificate in Home Modification program in 2011. And since then, she has been performing accessibility assessments and identifying barriers to function and access for clients with disabilities across private, state, commercial, federal sectors, and also internationally in Guam and Australia. Her medical background provides a unique problem-solving perspective that we will hear about today. I'm Emily Neighbors, Program Manager of the Fall Prevention Center of Excellence at the University of Southern California's Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. I educate service providers and professionals and create partnerships to advance fall prevention with a focus on home modification and aging in place strategies. Before we hear from our presenters, I will give some brief background and an overview of home modification. The USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology is the oldest and largest school of its kind. Our faculty and staff have conducted applied research in home modification, universal design, and fall prevention for over 30 years. We also develop and disseminate information for consumers and professionals, and we disseminate that through our two websites, which will be shown at the end of the slides. And we offer professional online training through our Executive Certificate in Home Modification program. This webinar is being shown through our project funded by the Administration for Community Living called Promoting Aging in Place by Enhancing Access to Home Modifications. We want to advance home modification as an integral part of aging in place. The home environment plays a critical role that significantly affects how home and community-based services are delivered. Please stay tuned for future webinars, technical assistance briefs, and an online training for the Aging Network on home modification-related topics as part of this project. As I imagine all of you on this webinar must know, more people are aging in the community, and more people are living with disabilities and chronic conditions. More care is being delivered in home settings as well. However, housing, be it urban, suburban, or rural, was not made with aging in mind. As we age, our homes age with us and often present safety hazards and barriers to daily activities as our abilities and needs change over time. Additionally, older persons who need home modifications the most, such as the oldest old, low income, frail, or those living in the oldest part of the housing stock are the least likely to have them. When you look at where falls occur, the majority occur inside the home as opposed to away from home or outside near the home. Home modification and home assessment are a key component of a multifactorial fall prevention, falls intervention. And what do we mean when we say home modification? It's changing the environment to remove hazards that could cause falls, such as clutter, add supports, such as grab bars and handrails, or change how or where activities occur. Home modifications can reduce hazards, increase independence and ease of doing daily activities, and can support caregivers as well. We wanted to provide some examples of home modifications. First, looking at the bathroom, we have here a gentleman using his towel rack and soap dish for support getting into the tub. And in the middle and on the right, examples of more supportive features such as grab bars, a handheld shower head, a shower seat, and textured tile flooring, as well as innovative lighting. That last one is from Eschaton in Northern California. Looking at the kitchen, we recommend storing frequently used items in easy-to-reach places to avoid the need to climb up high to reach something, such as how you see on the left. And on the right, we also see different height countertops and a place to sit while preparing food. And lastly, we'll look at the stairs. It's ideal to have rails on both sides in case someone has a preference for one side, if they've had a stroke, for an example, or if you're just carrying something up and down the stairs. You want to avoid having clutter on those stairs, and it's important to have adequate lighting as well. This webinar is aimed primarily at the Aging Network. The National Association of Area Agencies on Aging conducted a 2017 survey in which nearly 2/3 of area agencies on aging indicated they had some type of home modification provision. We hope that this webinar helps those of you who are involved in a home modification related activity and those who may be interested in exploring it for the future. Home modification is a process that involves multiple activities and phases, from education to referrals, funding to the actual installation and assessment as well. And there are many types of professionals involved. We really hope that this webinar can help you find a role you can play in home modification. Here are some links to websites to get more information about fall prevention and home modification, the resources, tools, and trainings that we offer at the University of Southern California. As well, the Gerontology School itself offers a number of online graduate programs that you may be interested in. And now I'm going to pass the webinar on to Denise Levine.
Okay, just wanted to tell you all a little bit more about myself. I've been working at the Idea Center for about 23 years now, and I've personally designed over 1,000 home modification projects, and they're mostly around Western New York and throughout New York State. The projects have ranged from families with children who have disabilities to aging adults looking to age in place. And that includes both modifications to their existing homes and designing new homes that are designed to allow them to comfortably age in place. My presentation will primarily focus on topics such as why are home mods needed, what are some of the barriers to getting home mods done, and I'll show you examples of some projects I've done. But more importantly, I want to give you guys a sense of what it's like to be in the trenches of the whole home modification process and all of the variables involved in getting projects completed. So as we begin, I think the most important question is, why do we need to do home mods? So of course there are many reasons, But as you've probably already guessed, the most common reason is financial. Money is always an issue, and many people can't afford to move from their current residence. And that's especially true for older adults, since they often lived on fixed incomes. And often the cost of relocation is far greater than making modifications, and not to mention also the stress that goes along with planning a move and physically having to move all of their stuff. Another reason why we do home modifications is that many people have a strong desire to remain in their own homes and stay independent for as long as possible. And unfortunately, as we all know, most homes are designed as if people will never grow old, and therefore they're not designed to accommodate the needs of people over the age of 65. A recent housing survey done by AARP found that about 90% of older Americans want to stay in their current homes for the rest of their lives. And some of this is based on relinquishing some level of control over their lives. Some of it is based on fear of change and the unknown, but sometimes these homes are where couples have created a life together and raised their children, so it holds a lot of memories for them. Another reason is the prevalence of what we call the Peter Pan syndrome among older people. Many people believe that they'll never grow old, such as in the story of Peter Pan, and this is unfortunately how most housing is designed. For example, most houses have stairs to the second floor, and a lot of times that's where the main bedrooms and bathrooms are. And a person who may have been able to climb stairs easily when they were in their 50s and 60s may find it increasingly difficult once they reach their 70s and 80s. And another reason is little funding for new construction. So there are some sources of funding available for home mods, but it's severely limited. And that money that is available is typically not allowable for newly built homes. There are programs that you've probably heard of, like reverse mortgages, that are available to people 65 years and older, but they have some benefits, but without getting into all the specifics, they're basically loans that allow homeowners to convert their home equity into cash, and not every person will qualify. They're quite costly, and a lot of times they're really complex, and understanding the intricacies involved in being able to apply for that is sometimes really, really difficult. Another reason is people are living longer, and that's basically because of advances in medicine and technology, and people are able to take better care of themselves, and they're staying more active. You see YMCAs and senior centers popping up all over the place, and people are actually really taking advantage of the availability of those. And the fastest growing group of people are over the age of 75, and it's estimated that between the years 2000 to about 2030, the number of people over the age of 65 will increase by about 147%. And, that's really a significant number. And another reason is that age-segregated housing just isn't adequate, and the percentage of units that are fully accessible is actually quite low unless people want to go to places like nursing homes or other assisted living facilities. And as I've already discussed, people don't want to go to facilities like this. They want to remain in their own homes, and they resist going into any facility that they deem as somewhat institutional. And speaking of assisted living, the housing industry has responded to the shortage of housing for the elderly by building all these assisted living facilities, and they're popping up all over the place, at least around Buffalo and the Western New York area. The problem with those developments is that they're primarily targeted at market rate consumers, and therefore they're not an option to seniors with an average income of probably less than $25,000 per year. And unfortunately, many seniors have incomes way below that figure. So although there are some low-income facilities available, they're few and far between, and they typically have very long waiting lists. So now that we know why we need home modifications, I'd like to discuss some of the barriers that are present in providing them to people in need. So I previously mentioned cost when discussing why people can't afford to move, and that same issue of money applies to why home modifications are not an option for some people. Many people, they lack the necessary finances to make any significant modifications to their home, so they basically just make do with what they have and just typically keep the status quo for as long as they possibly can. Another reason is there's a lack of awareness among consumers, and most people don't know where to find information, who to contact, what's available to them, is there anybody local doing the work, etc. And there's also, when it comes to older people, there's also the trust factor of working with contractors. Contractors sometimes have a very bad reputation, and sometimes it's deserved and sometimes it's undeserved. But regardless, putting your trust and your money, and sometimes it's a person's life savings into a stranger, is sometimes difficult and actually quite frightening. So as the old saying goes, denial is not just a river in Egypt. So in general, people don't like to admit that they're in need of assistance, and some see it as being vulnerable or showing weakness, so they either do nothing or resist help from others. A good example is typically when I go into an older person's home and try to assess their situation, I ask them to tell me about the difficulties they encounter in their house, and sometimes I'll ask them to show me how they do certain things. So I once got called into a home by an older woman's daughter who she told me that her mom was having some trouble in the house, and she wanted me to come in to help her. And when I went in, she mentioned that she was having trouble getting on and off the toilet. So I asked her to show me how she does it. She said, "Oh, it's fine. She manages." And I asked her, "What do you mean by you manage?" And she basically went and explained her routine to me. And what she does is, when she's getting on and off the toilet, she grabs the back of the toilet, and then she grabs onto the windowsill, and then she grabs the shower curtain, and then she turns her body 90 degrees, and then she grabs onto the toilet paper holder, and she plops down onto the toilet. And then when she's done, she gets up and does the exact same routine, in the opposite direction. And I said, if I installed a horizontal grab bar next to the toilet, wouldn't that help you and eliminate all of those steps, and also provide additional safety, because I don't think grabbing onto a shower curtain is your best option. If you fall, that shower curtain is going down with you. And she said, "You know what? I'm fine. I manage. This is the way I've been doing it for a very long time. I'm good." And, she didn't want to admit that it was a problem. So, there's only so much you can do when you're trying to help somebody if they don't want to admit that they have a problem. And to follow that up, another barrier is adaptive behavior, and it sort of ties in with what I just said. So adaptive behavior is when someone is adapting the way they do things based on their environment. So in other words, many people remain passive and learn to live with their circumstances instead of taking an active role in making changes. And a really good example of this is this photo that I'm showing you. This was a project that I was called to do for an elderly gentleman who had just had double hip replacement surgery, and he was currently using a wheelchair, and he needed to have wheelchair access to his home. And afraid that any type of permanent ramp would label him as disabled or stigmatize him by his neighbors, he requested that I install a series of lightweight portable ramps that could easily be installed by his caregiver whenever he needed to leave the residence. And then once he was safely inside the home, his caregiver would go out and remove the ramp and the platform and basically store them within the house, because he was so afraid of what the neighbors would think. And he was already in his late 80s, but this was a problem, and we couldn't convince him to put any sort of permanent ramp. And the next barrier is decision-making ability or authority. So often the person needing home mods is not necessarily the person who makes the decisions and controls the money. And sometimes that happens when you have a child that has a disability, or if you are the son or the daughter making the decisions for an elderly parent. So a good example of this is I had an elderly client in Greenwich, Connecticut that was a double amputee, and he had his bathroom and his bedroom up on the second floor. And in order to use the bathroom a few times a day and at the end of the night to go up to his room or to shower, he had to transfer from his wheelchair on the first floor onto a chairlift. It took about 5 minutes to go up the chairlift, then transfer onto another wheelchair that was waiting at the top, and then he would go into the bathroom and then transfer from his wheelchair onto the toilet and then back, and then do the whole routine again. And when I made a suggestion that we were going to build a new bathroom on the first floor and do some other things within the house to enable him to basically live on the first floor. His daughter said she didn't want that to happen, and she basically canceled the project because when her father passed away, he was in his 80s. When he passed away, she was going to inherit the house, and she didn't want her house to look institutional and have grab bars. So basically she was willing to watch her father struggle to get up to the second floor because whenever he passed away, whether it was 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, she was going to inherit the house and didn't want that to be as part of her living environment. So priorities were a little bit strange. Another one is finding qualified professionals, and there's difficulty in finding qualified professionals. And I think this picture basically speaks for itself. I don't know if you can notice, you can see this, but the toilet paper dispenser was put in the shower. So in general, I was just showing this to sort of show that it's hard to find good contractors anytime, let alone one that has experience and expertise in the field of providing accessible home modifications. So while we're talking about contractors, this brings us to another barrier, which is the variation in the bids submitted by different contractors. Many times people ask me why they need an architect. Why can't they just call a contractor, cut out the middleman, cut out the additional costs involved with hiring an architect, and just have the contractor do the project for them? And I think these next few slides will show why getting an architect involved is really important. Without an architect, you're likely to get 3 different contractors who are likely to submit 3 different bids in not only price but also scope of work. So for example, if you had a contractor come and give you an estimate for a ramp, you may get 3 different prices for ramps made with 3 different materials. One may be speccing it in wood, one may be making it of concrete, and one may be making it of metal. So you have to basically compare apples to apples and not apples to bananas. So here's one bid for a project. This is an actual project that I was involved in, and I'll show you my solution at the end. But this was a project, the first contractor came in. I was not involved yet. The agency had a contractor come in, and you can see he just provided this narrative, and at the bottom, you can't see it here, but at the bottom was just like a bottom line cost, and it really didn't have a lot of detail. It said, like, convert bathroom to handicap use. But it doesn't say how long what size or what height the toilet was going to be, where the toilet was going to be located. If there are grab bars, how high are the grab bars? How long are the grab bars? Are they diagonal? Are they vertical? Are they, horizontal? You didn't know whether you were getting a shower or a tub. You didn't know if the sink was going to have space to roll under. You didn't know if they were going to have lever handles. So it was really ambiguous. You didn't really know what you were getting. The next contractor sort of did the same thing and gave a bottom price. There wasn't much detail. And then the next contractor did the same thing, install a deck with a ramp, moved the bathroom, and gave a bottom price. And then this contractor's proposal is unlike any of the other submissions in that he actually provides a sketch, but it's quite elementary without any elaboration or scales or dimensions. And funding a project based on a drawing like this just puts too much trust in a contractor's knowledge and ability and just leaves too much room for the contractor to make important decisions. And understand that when a contractor is making suggestions for things, they're going to make money off of everything that they suggest. So if you say you need a grab bar, they might suggest installing 5 grab bars because they're going to get money. They're going to make money for every grab bar that they installed. If you tell me you need grab bars, I'm going to put on a drawing where the grab bars are needed and how many you need, but I don't make any more or less money whether you need 5 or 3 because it takes 2 seconds for me to draw. So after this whole process, all of those examples were submitted for this project, but because of the lack of detail in any of the bids, all of the proposals were denied, and the process of getting the modification was essentially stalled. And frustrated and unable to wait any longer, the client's father built a ramp as a temporary solution. And although it was usable, it lacked many of the features necessary to be considered compliant and safe. So the funding agency then decided to refer the client to me, and I went out there, did my assessment, designed a new ramp. My proposal was submitted, and it was approved within a few weeks, and the construction began soon afterwards. And this is the proposed plan that I submitted, and it's just part of the submission package. I did it in AutoCAD. It's to scale. It's got dimensions. It's got notes. And then I included a few more pages of specifications and other pages that had details. So it would appear that this would be a happy ending, right? Well, not so fast. So although the final product was much more usable and permanent than the ramp that was previously there, the final product wasn't built to my specifications. This is basically a concrete version of the temporary wooden ramp, but it's non-compliant. The homeowner convinced the contractor not to put on handrails because he thought that they would look ugly. They shortened the upper landing because the homeowner wanted to put that fancy angled staircase, which in doing that is also non-compliant because it reduced the size of the upper landing in front of the door. There's also dangerous drop-offs on the side of the ramp where the wheelchair can easily slip off. So even with the drawing that I submitted and all the specs, sometimes the contractor and the homeowner get together and they decide that they're going to do something completely different. And since the agency had already approved it, they never had like a post-occupancy evaluation to go make sure that it was done correctly. So now we're going to move on to process, and I'm basically going to go through this quickly just to let you know how home mods get done. So of course every project will be a little different, but I think in any project the most important thing to note is that it's a collaborative process and everyone needs to be cooperating and communicating effectively for the project to be successful. So here's a list of steps that are typical in the types of projects that I do. It may be different for each of you, as I mentioned, based on where the funding is coming from and whether the funding program you're using has specific requirements. But this is generally the process that I follow, and it seems to work as long as all the parts are working together. Of course, there are always unforeseen hiccups along the way, but we deal with those as we come to them. So the process begins when someone requests services or needs assistance in some way, and they'll likely get in contact with an agency, and then they become enrolled in the program, and then they're assigned a service coordinator or a social worker. That service coordinator or social worker will confirm that there's a need, and that gets the ball rolling. The second process is functional needs assessment by an OT or PT. So since the main goal of an EMOD is to develop a design based on a client's need, it's important, in my opinion, to have an OT or PT provide a functional needs assessment. Based on my experience, if someone told me they had difficulty getting in and out of their house, I think I can comfortably figure out the best option for them, but I'm certainly not trained or certified to provide a functional assessment on what piece of equipment is most suitable or what their abilities will be down the road. So I leave that to the other professionals, the PTs or OTs. The next is the on-site assessment by the architect. I highlighted this in blue only because I'm going to go into it a little bit further in the next slide. So after the assessment's done by the OT or PT, I typically schedule an appointment to go out to the house. I see whether the PT or OT's recommendations can be done based on the existing conditions of the house. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. The next is once back at the office, I do drawings on the computer, ensure that everything is feasible, which becomes more apparent once I can see everything to scale. Next, the design process continues as we add more details and notes to the drawings to make them ready to submit to get a permit. Then comes the bidding process where the drawings are sent to different contractors. And I typically would suggest that nobody get any less than 3 bids, and that way it stays competitive. And then next is the contractor selection. If the funding's coming from the state or through an agency, typically the lowest bidder will get the job. But if it's privately funded, the client can really select whoever they want, but the individual must be licensed and insured. And then finally, the last step, the contractor begins the construction and completes the project. So as an architect, what are the things that are important to me and will help me make the right decisions for the client and for the conditions I'm working with? Well, I always think of it as a fun little puzzle, and I try to make everything fit together, even with all the variables. So the first thing I want to know is to get some consumer data. So in other words, I have to identify the needs of the person. What are the activities of daily living? If I'm dealing with a bathroom, I might ask, do they like to soak in a tub? Do they like to take a shower? What are your functional abilities? What activities of daily living are most difficult? What's the level of independence? What role, if any, do caregivers have? And once I get all of that information, I move on to learning about the environment. So what are the constraints of the home? Is there space availability? Are there site limitations? What are the options for modifications? Does the structure or condition of the house allow for modifications? Are there structural limitations to allow me to move walls or widening door openings? Those are all the things that I can get from taking a look at the house and going down to the basement, looking at the way beams run, looking at posts and columns that are supporting the floors, and then financial data. This is where we identify what resources are available. Are there funding sources or grants that the client has to qualify for? Are modifications within the scope of the funding program? Is there a ceiling on the amount of money that they can spend? All of these things are really, really important. So this brings us to what could possibly go wrong. So with all the variables that I already spoke about, what could possibly go wrong? This is always my favorite part of the presentation. It seems as if seeing what people are doing wrong has a higher impact than seeing what people are doing right. So I will go through these pretty quickly. I'll explain them. So this is not a project that I did, but this is a project that I went to go look at that a funding agency was really, really proud of and wanted to show it to me. Basically, they needed to get an older person in and out of the house. They built this ramp. It was spec'd at 1 to 12. The contractors started building it at the door, and when they got towards the sidewalk, they realized they were running out of space and ended it with stairs. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 risers. So basically, the person couldn't get out of the house because they couldn't negotiate the stairs. So it was really just a waste of money. The next one is a ramp that I went to go replace. It was a ramp that was built, it was very steep, and it went from the sidewalk straight to the door without a landing. So when the door opened, the person was already on an incline, and when they came home, they couldn't open the screen door because they were on an incline. So it made it really impossible for anybody to use this ramp. The next one was a valiant effort, but basically what happened is they were able to put this really steep little threshold ramp, I would say, and it got them from the front door to a stair, and then it didn't go anywhere else. So it was really unusable. This ramp was constructed by a landlord as a means of getting his disabled tenant in and out of the house, and although it was built with good intentions, it's extremely steep and provides no level upper landing. So the tenant was never able to really use this independently because he would roll down the ramp as soon as he got to the door. And this ramp was built off a porch, and basically it ends with a step. So it was a nice ramp built at a slope to 1 to 12, but once it got to the driveway, they ran out of room, and they just put a step. And this is one I'm going to show you. So this family called me because they wanted to have a residential elevator installed in their house, and they complained that they had a ramp previously built a few years back, but it was no longer functional. And they were having difficulty getting their daughter in and out of the house because the ramp wasn't usable. And when I arrived, I saw that the ramp was generally in good condition, but covered with so much junk that that's why they couldn't navigate it. And somehow they thought that the state was going to pay for an elevator because this ramp was unusable. So, like I said, this is my favorite part of the presentation because I think it's really just amazing that stuff like this gets built. It's almost comical, but the reality is that it's really serious. And for every one of these ridiculous photos I've shown, there's someone whose needs were not met and who basically were failed by the system. So, these photos are really quite tragic. So to answer what could possibly go wrong, a lot. So now I'll move on to how do we do it right. So I'm going to show you a bunch of case studies, and all these case studies are projects that I've personally completed. This first case study is a pretty large project, far greater than most of the home modification projects I've done. It was paid for by the client out of their own pocket, and it included modifications within the existing home, as well as we put a new 3-story addition with an elevator. It was initially done for a family that was adopting 2 children, and they found out a week or 2 before they brought them home that their daughter had cerebral palsy, and so they designed this house mainly for her, and at some point they knew that they would retire and move, and they wanted to leave her with a house that was fully usable. But as it turned out, the father ended up having a stroke, and they still all live in this house, and now it's quite usable to the whole family. So you can see they were using this little aluminum temporary ramp in the front, and in the back they didn't have an entry. If I move on, so you can see from the photo on the left the portion of the house that was existing, and then I added a 3-story addition with an elevator. You can see the elevations on the right. And then, so I changed the entry. I put in an overhang, and I put a new concrete ramp. And from the street, I ended up the house is pretty close to the street because it's in the city of Buffalo, and the lots are pretty small. So it didn't look like a ramp. I ended up stepping up the edging so that you can see the ramp sticking out. But from the street, I think I have another photo of that. There's the ramp looking from the driveway, and that's what you see on the right. The picture on the right shows you what it looks like from the street. So it was nice because we were able to hide the ramp, and then they were able to plant around it. So this next project, case study number 2, is for a husband and wife, a couple who were in their 70s, and the woman was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. And her condition was slowly deteriorating, so they wanted to do a complete bathroom modification. They also were paying out of pocket. So let's move on. So these were the existing conditions, and then what I ended up doing in the first photo, I ended up taking out a portion of a hallway closet, which you wouldn't see in this picture, but it's that corner, and we did a complete roll-in shower with a trench drain. The tile was heated, the seat was heated. We put in a handheld height adjustable shower head. We actually put in 2 of them. We put a grab bar in where she needed it. We took out the tub. Here's a before and after picture. She wanted assistance onto the toilet. She was previously using a toilet frame, and we put the fold-down swing arms so that she can lift them down when she needed them, and her husband can lift them back up into place when he's not using them. We took out the sink and vanity. We basically turned it 90 degrees, put in a new wall-hung countertop sink, and put in a new linen closet. The next project is just a basic before and after of a ramp, a wooden ramp. This is where the stairway, the client was using a wheelchair, and we added a platform lift so the person would not have to transfer out of the wheelchair and can go up and down the stairs independently. The next one is a before and after of a bathroom that we pulled out the shower, which you can't see in the first picture. We replaced it with a walk-in tub. We replaced the toilet with a higher toilet with fold-down grab bars. We put in a wall-hung sink and removed the existing sink. The next one, we did a wet room where we pulled out this stall shower that was really difficult for the person to step over the lip, and we just created a showering room that the person could receive assistance easily, and the person assisting them wouldn't get wet themselves. The next one is pulling out a tub and putting in a walk-in tub, and also you can see that fold-down grab bar. And this is the last project I'm going to show you. This is an interesting one only because I created a bathroom out of something that didn't exist. The person had their bedroom on the second floor, and it was really difficult to go up and down the stairs, so they wanted to create a shower and bedroom on the first floor. So what you're looking at in the first picture is their living room, and what you're looking at in the second picture is their dining room, that they had a couch in there. And you can see a little portion of the hospital bed that the client was sleeping in. So basically what we did is we turned the dining room into a bedroom, and then I added a bathroom in the portion of the living room, and this is the finished product. So this client needed a ceiling track lift and needed to be brought in on the lift and then lowered into the tub. And the tub that they specifically requested was the Parker height adjustable reclining bathtub. And it seemed to work really well. I didn't pick the colors, but I picked all the fixtures and designed the bathroom. And that should be it.